Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always thought I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCGRadio. Now, a first little note that I must give you before we start today, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you wondering why my YouTube channel has not been updated for about a week, hopefully you'll be listening to this on YouTube, or if you're not, at least you're able to. The simple answer is a combination of three factors. Firstly, I spent the weekend in London watching the Lions eventually beat the Atlanta Falcons at Wembley, leaving me unable to record. Secondly, I have been, unfortunately, in homes with TalkTalk internet, and I know not all my listeners are in the UK, and in fact the majority of my listeners are outside of the UK. But for those in the UK, don't use TalkTalk. I've had nothing but bad experiences. Purely my opinion, of course, blah blah blah. Can't make you do anything, but I would very much tell you not to do so, or at least advise you not to do so. And the third reason is my laptop PC has died. Now I've still got my work PC, hence why I'm recording this podcast, but programs like Camtasia, which I need to do my YouTube videos, are currently on my home PC only. Hopefully within a few days, when I go back to work at the beginning of next week, within a week or so, I should be able to go to work, get the programs I need to record more YouTube videos, and I'll be flicking to a one PC system, which, to be honest, I should have been using all along. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason for that. Nice and simple. But unfortunately, it's not something which I'm able to do right this second. So if you're waiting for YouTube videos, and I have, at least at last looking, I was 599 subscribers. I thank all of you that have subscribed recently. I've not forgotten about you. I've not stopped doing videos. The Evolutions video, which I promised you will be the next one going up. But unfortunately, it's not something which I'm able to do right this second. But it will be up as soon as I possibly can. Now, moving on to this week, it is 9 o'clock on Wednesday. This is later than usual because of the aforementioned problems that I have been having. So what I am going to be doing, ladies and gentlemen, today is just going through a little bit of news, and then we're going to be flicking through Phantom Forces. We're not going to be flicking through a huge amount of Phantom Forces. We are going to be focusing on the trainers and the EXs. I don't really have the time /hardware whatever to go about doing a monster 1 hour everything in Phantom Forces podcast today. So like we have done a couple of times in the past, we are going to be looking purely at the EXs and the trainers because generally they tend to be the most exciting cards from a set, but I'll be looking at them in a bit more detail. I'll be talking about what other people have said and whether I agree or disagree. I'll be looking not just whether they're good, but where they fit within the metagame, and I am going to be looking at issues like whether you should be running Burbank City Gym or Dimensional Valley in your Gengar list, assuming of course you have a will to run a Gengar list. Now, looking first of all at news for this week, and I'm going to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, it's fairly slim pickings as far as news goes. The only real news we've seen is that there is going to be a Team Magma versus Team Aqua Double Crisis mini set in January. Now, this is coming out in Japan, and this is essentially the same as we've seen for the Shiny Collection they had in Japan, which was released as the Radiant Collection within one of our sets this year. When we had that last reprint set, Legendary Treasures, I want to say, it was kind of part of that. You'd get your Legendary Treasures cards, and then you'd get, I think, 3 Radiant Collection cards per pack. But they also had their first Dragon Mini Collection, which was released over here as Dragon Vault, where you would actually buy 3 little booster packs with 5 cards in each, all of which were holo, as their own little free pack blisters with a promo card. Now, unlike the Shiny Collection and Dragon Collection, these are not all mini. They are not all holofoil. There are 34 cards in the set. There are 6 cards per booster pack, and I believe there were 5 before. And it says that it is a guaranteed holo card in each pack. What that means, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is that not every card is holo like we have seen with these sets in the past. The other thing which is worth mentioning is that they appear to be focused around Camerupt and Sharpedo, presumably giving us the Mega Evolutions of Camerupt and Sharpedo as well. So if there are any Camerupt and Sharpedo fans out there who are a little bit dismayed that we haven't got the Mega EXs, they're coming there. Now, the one thing that I would add from this little revelation is that and I say it's a revelation, I'm jumping to conclusions here, and PokeBeach.com have come to the same conclusion as I, and they're knowledgeable fellows, and I like to think I know a little bit about this trading card game of ours. So I think it's a fair kind of point to assume at this point. But what is interesting that we can take from this is that Mega EXs are being given out in various different ways. Mega Diancie and Mega Metagross EXs are being given out in their own little kind of boxes, kind of like Garchomp EX and Crocodile EX were given out. And we are seeing potentially Camerupt and Sharpedo being given out in these mini sets, as well as the regular ones being given out in the sets. Now, one thing that is worth mentioning, of course, is that we don't know how we're going to be getting this Team Magma versus Team Aqua Double Crisis mini set. It could be its own mini set like the Dragons, or it could be shoved into a kind of reprint set like we saw with Legendary Treasures. At this stage, we really don't know. I would like to think at this stage, and this is nothing more, ladies and gentlemen, than just a flat-out guess, but I would like to think at this stage it will be its own mini-set like Dragon Volt was. If nothing else, then it's clearly being released to kind of push the new Ruby and Sapphire remakes, and it would make sense that these were being released kind of in that stage as their own little product, as kind of an advertisement. Having said that, they went from Dragon Volt originally, and then Shiny Collection was turned into Radiant Collection within Legendary Treasures. Now, maybe this was because of poor sales figures for Dragon Volt, maybe it was because they had this Legendary Treasures set and they wanted to pad it out with these cards. The honest answer is, at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know. And that is the news for this week. I'm afraid there is literally no other news than that. So let's have a look through the Phantom Forces set. Now, one thing which is worth pointing out at this stage, there have been pre-releases. We have seen the complete set. So, for instance, I can tell you that, and I did tweet this out recently, as I predicted on the podcast on more than one occasion, we are having a reprint of Enhanced Hammer, and we are having a reprint of VS Seeker. Now, both of these, based on the releases in Japan, both of these were a pretty safe bet that they were going to happen, but it's nice that we've actually got this confirmation that these will be happening. So, let's start off, ladies and gentlemen, with the EXs, and we will save the juiciest ones for last. They are the ones that have the mega ones, and we will start off with Malamar EX. Now, Malamar EX is a Dark-type Pokemon, and this basically brings two issues straight away. And of course, like I've said, if we're only doing the EXs, this means my analysis can be more in-depth, because I'm not trying to rush. Now, two things about Dark EXs, and we don't even need to look at Malamar EX really before we see this. One problem is going to be it's weak to Dark. And this has been bad for Thundurus and Darkrai recently, and it's bad because fighting is big. Fighting decks are having some success, although not oodles of. But one thing which we have seen having a lot of success over the last few weeks is this Donphan deck, and Donphan will eat Malamar for breakfast. It is really not going to take very much for Donphan to do 90 damage, and in fact, as Donphan starts off doing 40 damage, all it needs is a Silver Bangle and a Strong Energy to one-hit Malamar EX for 2 prizes with only a single energy attachment. So that goes against it first of all. The other thing which goes against Malamar EX is that we've got Darkrai and we've got Yveltal. And I know I've just talked about Dark Pokemon being weak to fighting, but don't forget, of course, that Yveltal EX is resistant to fighting, which is why it's had continued relevance in the metagame, whereas Darkrai has been going away. Although part of that is because of Dark Patch. Now, so there's two knocks on it first of all. It's got a bad weakness, and it's basically competing with Darkrai and Yveltal. But it is actually interesting. It's got a nice ability, Hyper Hypnosis, and it reads thusly: when you attach an energy from your hand to this Pokemon, you may use this ability. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. Automatic sleep. Now, we know if you put them to sleep, your opponent is going to have a 50-50 chance of waking up at the beginning of their next turn, but that's by the by. You've still got that automatic sleep. That's still pretty darn good, and we've all seen how annoying that can be from Hypnotoxic Laser. Hypnotoxic Laser essentially gives a 75% chance to sleep, because you've got to put them asleep with a coin flip, and then they've got to not wake up on a coin flip. So this is instantly better than something like Hypnotoxic Laser. But the other thing here is that it's free. You're going to attach energy from your hand at some point, so it really is just an added bonus. And as just an added bonus, this isn't really the reason you play Malamar, but if you're playing it anyway, it's pretty good. So, bad weakness, competing with Yveltal, decent ability. This is one that could be playable with the right attack, and the honest answer is, I don't know. Now, depending on how much you like puns, you may love or detest the name of this attack. It's called Maximar. Get it? Maximar. Because it's Malamar, and it does maximum damage. Oh, yes. And for 2 energy, a dark and a colourless, it allows you to do the attack, and it reads like this. Flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 60 damage times the number of heads. For a non-EX Pokemon, you're generally looking at 2 heads, because you'll probably have a Muscle Band attached. For EX Pokemon, you are looking at 3 heads. That's pretty good. Now, we've still got that Victini, which allows you to redo coin flips. We've also got an item we'll see in a minute, which allows you to redo coin flips. So, potentially, and I might just read that... Let's read that item in a second, because I might have got that a little bit wrong. So essentially, if you can hit a bunch of heads, you are going to be winning pretty gosh darn quickly. And it is far from a... and Trick Coin does allow you to just reflip. This is far from a done deal, but if you're feeling lucky, it's worth a go. Now, speaking of someone who is currently on a streak... continuing streak, of 9 competitive games going second in tournaments... This is not a attack I would particularly want to be using. But, it's each energy, not energy attached. So double colourless gives you 2 coin flips. Now, what I can see Malamar as is a kind of a tech in an Yveltal deck. Put it in there, build it up on the bench, maybe use it with Scramble Switch, flip it in, and you can do a load of damage. But let's not forget that if you pile damage on Yveltal, he does a huge amount of damage, and it's not on a coin flip. So that might be a reason you wouldn't want to use this. I like Malamar as a... Gosh darn it, there's 3 energy on it, let's see if I can hit triple heads for the win. Or there's 5 energy on it, let's see if I can hit 3 out of 5 for a win. Now, I think Malamar EX, and just to confirm what I've said in the podcast recently, I am always talking about standard format unless I specifically mention expanded format. Speaking of expanded format, I think Malamar is better there. Dark decks are better in expanded because Dark Patch is back in and Sableye back in, and when you've got when you've got Sableye back in and you've got Dark Patch back in, then you can pile energy on Malamar better and just use the Maximar attack to do a huge amount of damage. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still, because of its weakness and because of the coin flips, you're probably still better off going through, something like Yveltal, but there is potential there. I think people are going to make use of it. An Yveltal, remember, is only 20 damage per energy, whereas that Malamar is potentially 60 damage per energy. And actually, when you think about it, if you assume a 50% chance of hitting a heads, then you can essentially read that 60 damage as 30 damage per energy, which actually does make it more efficient than Yveltal, but more of a risk. I'll leave it up to you. Another one which is potentially useful but may not see a huge amount of damage is Forges EX. Weakness to metal is good, 160 HP is pretty bad, but that never stopped Ho-Oh EX, so let's not be too bad on that. Resistance to dark is nice, it's just a nice little bonus. First attack, lead, search for a supporter card, reveal it and put it into your hand. It's not a good attack. If you are desperate, it's better than nothing, but it's not a good attack. You don't want to be leaving an EX active, and 160 damage is less than average for an EX. So you don't really want to be leaving it active. And believe me, if you've been playing this game for a while, you know how much difference 10 HP can make. Having said that, if you're playing Forges EX, you're probably playing a fairy deck, and if you're attacking for 1 fairy energy on turn 1, you probably want to be using the regular Xerneas's Geomancy to search your deck and attach a fairy energy to each of 2 different bench Pokemon. But it does have a nice attack, Bright Garden. 20 damage times the number of grass and fairy Pokemon you have in play for 2 energy. Now, I like this because it's 2 energy, and you're probably going to be playing it in an Aromatisse deck where you can put 2 energy on it easily. Aromatisse, remember, is a stage 1 fairy Pokemon that allows you to move your fairy energy around as you like. The problem is this kind of maxes out at 120, so you can only have 6 Pokemon in general. It also is going to stop you using tech options like Mewtwo or Virizion that you may wish to use in an Aromatisse deck. Now you put a Muscle Band on, it becomes 140. You put a Virbank and Laser and it becomes 170, but again, in the same way we might want to have Rainbow Energy and Virizion down to stop special conditions, or we might want to have Mewtwo or Yveltal down to do big loads of damage by piling energy on, we might not want a Virbank City Gym down because we can have Fairy Garden, which if we've got Fairy Energy attached gives us free retreat, which not only helps because we've basically got free retreat for the entire game, assuming we're not affected by special conditions, hence why we bring in Virizion, but it adds space in our deck. You stick in, if you're playing an Aromatisse deck, and I've talked about Aromatisse a little bit recently, if you're playing an Aromatisse deck and you put in 4 Rainbow Energy and a bunch of Fairy Garden, you don't have to put any switching cards in, because essentially you can always just switch a Rainbow Energy up to your active Pokemon, free retreat it with Fairy Garden, because the Rainbow Energy acts as a Grass Energy to turn off special conditions using Virizion's ability, and then it also acts as a Fairy Energy to give you free retreat with Fairy Garden. So you don't really want to be using all Fairy and Grass Pokemon, you don't really want to be using Virbank City Gym. It's a powerful attack for 2 energy on a basic Pokemon, but I just think that the needing to only have Fairy and Grass Pokemon is going to be a pain, and the needing Virbank down is also going to be a pain. Now, for those of you, and there's probably a few of you that have noticed this, yes, Virizion does count as a Grass Energy. Maybe it was a clumsy example to use, but the fact of the matter remains, you might not only want to use Grass and Fairy Pokemon. I've already given you the examples of Yveltal and Mewtwo. You can get away with a Fairy Grass deck entirely, but it's going to limit your options, and even if you do have an entire Fairy Grass field and you get 6 Pokemon out, you still need Virbank Laser to put it up to 170, and that's going to be no good because you want to be running Fairy Garden. Florges, like Malamar, they are examples of Pokemon which I like, and I think they have I think they have potential, but I'm not a huge fan. So let's move on to the Metal EXs, and these are Pokemon which I think do see use. Now, I know I'm not going to be talking about the non-EXs, non-trainer cards much today, but I am going to quickly mention Bronzong. Bronzong, for those of you that have been playing a little while, is exactly like Electric, the old Stage 1 Pokemon, but instead of Lightning, it's Metal, and its basic doesn't have such an appalling HP. Remember that if you were lucky, you could be running 40 HP Electrics. Whatever the Timpole or whatever. No, I can't for the life of me remember what the basic for that was. But yeah, whatever it was, that's what we had. So, essentially, ladies and gentlemen, what we've got is a Pokemon which is a Stage 1, which basically allows you to attach a Metal Energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. This means you can get Metal Pokemon running nice and quickly. That basically brings Metal back as a type. The problem is, if you look at the attackers we've got, you've got Cobalion and Cobalion EX. Now, Cobalion's got some nice attacks, I encourage you to go look it up. But it's got Iron Breaker, which does 80 and stops them attacking, or Energy Oppress, which does 20 times the amount of energy attached to them for 2 energy. Neither of them are particularly great, although Iron Breaker can be annoying. What we do have, however, is Cobalion EX, but even Cobalion EX is not particularly great. The problem with Cobalion EX is that it basically it essentially maxes out at 100 damage. Now that 100 damage does go through anything, which means it can attack Sigilyph and it can attack Pyroar and all that good stuff, but it still maxes out at 100 damage, which is not particularly great. For those of you wondering if that Cobalion had been rotated, it was reprinted in Legendary Treasures, the aforementioned set, and it's not 20 times the number of energy on the defending Pokemon, it's 20 plus 20 for each energy on the defending Pokemon. So there we have it. But it's still not particularly great. The other Cobalion it's got a nice first attack, Cobalion EX. 30 damage and discarding a special energy attached to the defending Pokemon for 1 metal energy. Especially good given how much special energy is around at the moment, and let's not forget we've got this Drifblim running around which can help you to do more damage for that. But it's still far from ideal. And then you got 100, which goes for anything for free energy. What we need is a really solid metal attacker, and there are 2 potential ones in this set. Firstly, Aegislash EX. Now this has a really nice attack, Mighty Shield. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from each of your opponent's Pokemon that has special energy attached to it. Which means other effects and special conditions etc. still work, but damage doesn't hit Aegislash if the Pokemon has got special energy attached to it. That's pretty handy. The attack as a whole, 40 damage plus 20 for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon for free energy. If it's free metal energy, it does 100, which essentially means it's the same as Cobalion EX. You can add to it, but it's going to take a long time for that to do really good damage. You're not going to be... Now, if you pile 6 energy onto there, you're doing 160, pop a muscle band, boom, 180. You don't want to be putting 6 energy on any Pokemon. It does have a resistance to... a Psychic, which will help with Mewtwo, but it is still not particularly great. I like it. It will frustrate people. It will see play. It is a good Pokemon. The attack's just a little bit underpowered. But essentially, the reason why the old Eels decks were so good was because they had things like Rayquaza or Zekrom EX, which could come along and one-hit KO anything. What you need is a Pokemon that can come along and one-hit KO anything. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to the Dialga EX. Now, the first attack for free energy, a metal and a double colourless, which you can do as early as turn 2 with just a double colourless and a metal energy. 60 damage. If the defending Pokemon is a Pokemon EX, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. Now, they can retreat or switch or etc. to get out of that, but it's still annoying enough. If you use that on a Seismitoad, they're going to have to retreat into a different Seismitoad in order to attack the next turn, which is very useful. It also has resistance to lightning, although it does have a weakness to fire, and Pyro is still an issue. But it's also got an attack called Full Metal Impact. 150 damage, 2 metal, double colourless, 150, discard 2 metal energy, you put a muscle band on that, there's 170, that's your main attacker, ladies and gentlemen. Now it takes 4 energy, which will lead you reliant on Bronzong, but essentially you get 2 Dialgas out with double colourless on, you get 2 Bronzong on the bench, and every single turn you just Full Metal Impact for 150, discard 2 metal energy, switch into a Dialga on the bench, and then reattach those energy, and every turn you attack with one, attach 2 energy to the other, and just keep switching, doing 170 damage until you win the game. Now, I don't like the attack cost. 4 is a lot. I don't like the fact that with Enhanced Hammer coming back in, you're going to want to be using double colourless with Dialga, and that's going to make it vulnerable to things like Enhanced Hammer. I don't like the fact that you'll be vulnerable to Garbodor. I don't think this is as good as the old Eels decks were, because we're rolling in a different metagame than we were when Eels was around. But I do think it's a viable deck that people will use. I like Dialga more than Aegislash, but I like Aegislash because I like the fact that it can come in and, as well as hitting moderately hard, it can actually do you some damage. It can, well, not even that it can do you some damage, it can frustrate your opponent. It can stop them attacking. And if you can stop your opponent attacking, even for 1 turn, that can have a huge effect. Now, one way you could run a deck, and think of this as a nice little kind of extra tip, because I'm only going through half the set today, you could run it as a kind of Cobalion EX Hammers Drifblim deck, just working on stopping them using energy and attacking with Drifblim, but then using, a couple of Bronzong and a Dialga to attack as well. Whether this will be good or not, I don't know, but it's a fun little deck, which certainly I would like to try out, if nothing else. Now, the other deck... this brings us, I should say, are two best EXs in the set, as far as I'm concerned. And they're the ones that have Mega EXs. Maybe it's a little bit cheating, because I'm counting these EXs and Mega EXs the same. One thing which I do find interesting, and you'll have seen from my analysis so far, none of these EXs are garbage. None of them are bad. They are all potentially playable. The worst one I would say is, well, it's a toss-up between Malamar and Forges, and both of them are playable. Manectric EX is a lightning type EX, and I'm going to go back to what I said about Malamar. Electric type are weak to fighting, and that's bad for all the reasons I've said earlier. It's got a resistance to metal, which could be useful if a lot of these Pokemon are coming about, like we said, if these metal decks do come to prominence. But it's got 2 attacks. Firstly, Overrun, 1 energy, 20 damage, and 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Think of it like Landorus's attack, but for 10 more damage on each. It's not great, but for turn 1, 1 energy, it's viable. Second attack, Assault Laser, for a lightning and a colourless, 60 damage. If your opponent's active has a tool attached, this does 60 more damage. Now this is crucial, ladies and gentlemen, because nowadays, in today's current metagame, tools are absolutely huge. So my big tip for Manectric, do not just automatically think, boom, I'm going to evolve it, I'm going to Mega Evolve it into Mega Manectric EX. Do think about the fact that this second attack is very, very good. Now, it does 60 damage like Forges, except it does it far more easily. It's again 2 energy, but rather than having to have 6 Pokemon of a specific type on the field, you just need your opponent to have a tool attached. And think back to all the games you've played, and if you can't think back to them, have a look over the next couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen, as you go through the as you go through the next couple of tournaments, as you go through, have a look, ladies and gentlemen, at how often your opponent has a tool attached to their active Pokemon. It's going to be 90% of the time, whether it's Muscle Band, whether it's going to be Float Stone, or even something like a Spirit Link. I think Manectric EX's second attack is not to be slept on. Now, if you stick a Muscle Band on it, there's 140, that's going to kill non-EXs. You put a Muscle Band Verbank Laser, that goes up to 170, that kills EXs. Manectric EX, on his own, is very, very good. But he's got a Mega EX, and let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that Manectric has a Spirit Link, so you attach a Spirit Link to Manectric EX, and you can Mega Evolve him without your turn ending. Now, obviously this means that you're not going to be able to, pop a Muscle Band and use a second attack, but there are cards which allow you to bring tools back into your hand. So, things to consider. And I would run 1 or 2 of these cards. So you could, for instance, get the Muscle Band off, stick the Spirit Link on, and Mega Evolve. Manectric EX has 1 attack, 110 damage for 2 energy, attach 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Any basic energy, any benched Pokemon. This is a fantastic attack. Now, the one thing I would say is that you're generally going to want to Spirit Link Mega Manectric, and 110 rather than 120 hertz. And the reason is very simple. There are plenty of non-EXs that have 140 HP that won't be killed by this, and your average EX has 170 HP, and even if you have a Muscle Band Verbank Laser, that's only doing 160. So Manectric EX's 120 really is even though it's only an extra 10 damage, it really is an advantage over Mega Manectric's 110. But energy acceleration, essentially on turn 2, it's just fantastic. I don't think Turbo Bolt is a kind of attack where you're going to want to one-hit. I think Turbo Bolt is a kind of attack where you're going to sit back and accept the fact that you're going to be 2-hit KOing with this, because especially using Spirit Link, you're not going to be able to get the Verbank Laser Muscle Band combination, and even if you do, like I say, you're only doing 160. Now, one thing to remember, of course, if you're doing 160, they're still going to be poisoned, so they'll die coming into your turn, which could actually be better, but it gives them a chance to get out of the active or play a max potion or whatever. Maybe even play that stupid Cloak Tool card, which gets rid of special conditions. Whatever it is, it's still dodgy. I like taking a KO rather than hoping they die of poison coming back into my turn. But Mega Manectric EX, ladies and gentlemen, you get the 2-hit KO on anything. Even Mega EXs, most of them, will fall to this, because a couple of them do have 230, if I remember correctly. But even so, its energy, acceleration, it's 110 HP. It's pretty darn good. The other thing is, with 210 HP, something like a Donphan would have to do 110 to get the 1-hit KO. Now, that's still doable, of course, because Donphan plus Strong Energy plus Silver Bangle plus Fighting Stadium will be doing 110 for a single energy and can 1-hit KO you. 40 for the attack, plus 20 for Strong Energy is 60, plus 20 for the Stadium is 80, plus 20 for Silver Bangle, 30 for Silver Bangle is 110, but that's much harder to pull off. Mega Manectric is good. Now, the question of what you build up on the bench is entirely up to you, and you could do anything. Honestly, I would just want to go for something like a Mewtwo here, or an Yveltal, or something along those lines. Something that attacks for colourless energy that you can just pile energy onto. You could run it with lightning attackers, but the one thing you don't want to do is run an entirely fighting weak deck, which you'll generally be doing if you run lightning attackers. And we all know that some, like all the old Zapdos cards, have been resistant to fighting, but still, it's not something you want to be relying on. And the other thing, of course, is that there aren't really that many electric attackers that really hit for a lot of damage. And that brings me to my personal favourite, although actually, having looked through Manectric EX a second time going through this, preparing for this podcast, maybe Manectric EX is better. But I like Gengar EX. It's got a resistance to fighting, which we know in today's modern world is a very good thing. It's got a weakness to dark, which is pretty good because very few things are playing dark nowadays. Yveltal will have a field day with this, but as we saw, week 1 of regionals, Yveltal was huge and amazing and fantastic. Come week 2 of regionals, Yveltal was almost a non-factor. It really was. By the time week 2 came along, Yveltal EX was almost a non-factor. It wasn't entirely a non-factor, but it wasn't like it used to be. So, Gengar EX. First attack, night attack, 1 energy, put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokémon. That's pretty good. Second attack, 60 damage, psychic and double colourless, 60 damage, and poison, switch Gengar to the bench. Think of this like Donphan, but you need 3 energy, not 1, and instead of 40 damage, it does 60 damage plus poison. That, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very good. Now, there's a couple of cards which are going to help, but essentially, there is a Stadium which brings down the attack cost for 1, so Night Attack costs nothing, and Dark Corridor is a Psychic and a Colourless. Means you can do it on turn 2 of the game. But there are a couple other things that work in Gengar's favour, other than a favourable, weakness. It's got the energy, which we'll look at in a second, which reduces your retreat cost by 2, essentially giving Gengar EX free retreat. But there are things like, you can use this with Trevenant, because Trevenant can attack, and Trevenant's attack, something like 60 to the active, 30 to the bench, is very, very good. It's just most decks can't take advantage of it. So you can be flicking into Trevenant and attacking with it, which is pretty darn nice. And yes, it's 60 damage to the active, 20 damage to 2 benched Pokemon. That, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty good. But Sigilyph, you can attack with Sigilyph. Sigilyph is brilliant as a safeguard Pokemon, but most people don't attack with Sigilyph because they're not running Psychic Energy. Sigilyph, remember, has got that safeguard, and that safeguard attack, which basically stops it being hit. This Sigilyph, this way, it does 50 damage plus 10 more damage for each energy attached to the defending Pokemon. But if you've got that Stadium down, it does it for 1 Psychic Energy and 1 other energy. And if you're running the Special Energy, then you've even got free retreat on that Sigilyph, which gives you an advantage over Donphan decks because you're not relying on Floatstone. Do remember, though, ladies and gentlemen, that this new Psychic Energy is a Special Energy, and Enhanced Hammer is being brought back into the format. More on that in a minute. So ignoring Mega Gengar EX, just looking at Gengar EX as a hit-and-run Pokemon, it's really quite good. Donphan has shown it to be good, and Donphan has got all the extra stuff and the hit-and-run, but Gengar can do anything Donphan can, plus it poisons, plus it can attack with Trevenant and Sigilyph, and that I think is a huge advantage that Gengar has. When Donphan flicks into Pokemon, when it flicks into the Safeguard Pokemon, it's not attacking. When it flicks into the Outrage Pokemon, something like Zekrom, Reshiram, Kyurem, etc., it can attack, but then you're having to leave something active that you don't really want to block with. Trevenant blocks trainers, Sigilyph blocks EXs, and they can attack. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, how much trouble decks like Virizion Genesect and Speed Lugia have with Sigilyph. This opens up different strategies. Rather than just attacking with Gengar and switching into a Sigilyph, you could basically play the entire game essentially running a quad Sigilyph deck, because if your Speed Lugia opponent isn't running any non-EX Pokemon, you will win there and then, because you can just sit there and pick away at them. And a lot of Speed Lugia lists nowadays aren't running counters, and if they are, as soon as that counter goes down, then your quad Sigilyph is going to win. I'm not saying this is a perfect deck, but I'm saying I like Gengar's hit and run. It's very much like Donphan. It doesn't quite have the smashing power of Donphan. Go back to, I believe it was last week's podcast, and go back to my deck breakdown of Donphan on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/PTCGRadio, or just search PTCGRadio on YouTube. You'll find it quite nicely. But what you'll find, ladies and gentlemen, is that I've talked about the big smashing effect of Donphan, its second attack, the fact that we've got Fighting Stadium and Silver Bangle and Strong Energy to bring Donphan's attacks up higher. And that is true. But Gengar with a Burbank City Gym is doing 90, 60 plus a 30 for poison, which is 2 hitting anything anyway, and you can, and this is the thing I really love about Gengar that I think people are sleeping on. You can attack with Sigilyph, you can attack with Trevenant. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what I really, really love about Gengar. Going to Mega Gengar EX, I'm going to repeat just what I've said about it before. My thoughts haven't really changed. I like Phantom Gate, but I don't think it's amazing. A Psychic and 2 Colourless, which of course can be brought down to Psychic and Colourless using Dimensional Valley Stadium. And you get to choose one of your opponent Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. Any attack from any Pokemon on their side of the board, you don't have to pay the attack cost. There are different types. You do not have to pay the attack cost. You could do, for instance, let's say you could use Landorus's Land Judgment, but you could only use it for 80 damage, because you can only do the extra 70 damage if you discard a Fighting, and you're not going to discard a Fighting. But you would, for example, be able to use Reshiram's Blue Flare, because you can't discard 2 Fire Energy, but you don't have to discard 2 Fire Energy to do the attack. You do the attack, and then you discard 2 Fire Energy. So that's an important distinction to make. If you have to discard to do the attack, think Plasma Gale or the extra damage for Landorus's attack, you can't do it. But if you have to do it after doing the attack, like discarding the energy from Reshiram's Blue Flare, then you can copy that with Gengar. Not a huge fan of Mega Gengar EX, but I love that Gengar, and it's something which I very much will be testing. So let's go to the trainers now, and we've already done 35 minutes, so it's probably a good thing I'm not trying to do the whole set in this podcast. It would just take too long. A lot of these I've talked about before, so I will try and flick through slightly quicker some I've talked about before, but let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to take as long as it takes, and from a lot of the feedback I get from you guys, you get more annoyed by me apologising for the length of the podcast than you ever do the length of the podcast. So put one of your Pokemon into your hand, discard all cards attached to that Pokemon. Quite frankly, this is not a particularly good card. Think of it like Cassius, except you have to discard it all. It's just... It's not one that I particularly like. There are, of course, uses. For instance, you could discard energy, and that would be something which would be quite useful for you to do. You would be able to discard a bunch of energy if you were, for instance, running a Bronzong deck. That would be quite helpful. But honestly, outside of that, you can just, run something like Cassius. And that, for me, ladies and gentlemen, would be a better one. I'm not a huge fan of this card. I'm not going to talk about it at length. But any card which allows you to take something that was on your field and put it into your deck is going to be an asset. It allows you to stop a KO happening. It allows you to save your resources. But I don't like having to discard the stuff, although sometimes it can help. Battle Compressor, search your deck for up to 3 cards and discard them. If you're running a deck which wants cards in the discard, this is amazing. Flareon decks, this is great. Dark decks in expanded only, or even to be honest, in non-expanded, in standard, because you've still got that regular evil towel that allows you to attach to the bench. And we've talked on this podcast recently about using evil towel decks, and I even did a deck breakdown and a game with one such evil towel deck. It was the evil towel that went 504 at Houston Regionals. Go look that up on my YouTube channel for more information. So sometimes, and even Bronzong decks, you want cards in the discard. This can help you. Dimensional Valley is a fantastic stadium. Each psychic Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colourless less. And what this basically means is you get to attack with things like Gengar and Sigilyph for 2 energy rather than 3. Even something like Chandelure EX, which has historically not been good, could potentially come back into play, because Chandelure EX was always a pain because it was colourless psychic, so you couldn't use DCE, it was actually free energy attachments. Whether it's going to be good or not, I don't know. Gengar EX is probably better, but it's an option. As to whether you should use this or Burbank City Gym, I'm afraid I'm going to cop out. I would go for a 2-2 split. Early game you want Dimensional Valley, but when you've got enough energy on the field, you very much want Burbank City Gym, so that Gengar is one-hit KOing everything. Or you run Dimensional Valley with Muscle Band, Gengar's doing 80 plus poison, and then you don't need Burbank City Gym, so you run Dimensional Valley. So let me give that as a 2-part answer. If you are running a Gengar hit and run deck with Muscle Band, just run Dimensional Valley. You don't need the extra damage from Burbank City Gym. If you are running more of an option-based Gengar deck with Mega Gengar EX and you want Spirit Link, etc., then you want a couple Dimensional Valley for early game, but you'll want Burbank City Gym to do the extra damage. And that brings us to Enhanced Hammer. Discard a special energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It has got new art, which is kind of cool, but remember, you can use the old art versions. It's got the same name. There's not a lot to say about this card, except it is good. Seismitoad decks rely on this. And yes, I know Seismitoad blocks trainers, but they don't always block trainers every turn. Mewtwo relies on this. Evil Towel decks rely on DCE and popping it back to the bench. Fighting decks rely on strong energy. And I could keep going, but I'm not going to bother. Enhanced Hammer is big. Run it. You won't regret it. It's a brilliant card. Gengar Spirit Link, we've talked about this. It allows you to Mega EX a Gengar, but sometimes remember, it's going to be better to just hit and run with Muscle Band. Hand Scope allows you to look at your opponent's hand. It's kind of cool, but honestly, ladies and gentlemen, it's not good enough to warrant a space in your deck. Lissandra's Trump card, otherwise known as Lissandra's Last Resort in Japan. We talked about this before, and my thoughts remain the same. A lot of people have said this is a garbage card. I disagree. This essentially resets your deck, and this is good in certain situations. For instance, Virizion Genesect no longer has Super Rod to put energy back in. Lissandra's Trump card puts all of your energy back in. That is a good thing. Speed Lugia decks are going to want to put things like Cora's Machine and Plasma Energy back in their deck. This puts it all back in. It puts all of your supporters back in. So let me say it like this. If you've got a consistent deck that you can run through quickly, why would you not put one of these in? Let's say I'm playing a Speed Lugia deck, or one of these Pyral decks that revolves around things like roller skates and bicycle. I want to be able to run through my deck quickly, and if I can truly run through my deck really fast, why would I not then run Lissandra's Trump card so I can then run through it really fast, get everything I need, and then run through fast again? This is also going to be crucial if you're running a special energy heavy deck, coming across something like a Drifblim. Drifblim does 50 damage for each special energy in your discard pile. If I've got 6 special energy in my discard pile, I don't want Drifblim to come running amok. If I run this, I all of a sudden have no special energy in my discard pile. Manectric Spirit Link, I have the exact same thought as I did for Gengar Spirit Link. Again, sometimes you just want to use Manectric EX. There's a reprint of Professor Sycamore, which makes me sad because it means there's going to be a time when we've got Professor Sycamore and not Professor Juniper. For now, I'm running Juniper. We've seen this so many times. While we're on reprints, there is also a reprint of Tiano, which allows you to draw free cards. It's just as bad as it ever was, and Cherin was. It's not good. Don't run it. We've got better supporters. There's a reprint of Shauna, which is still not as good as it could be, but in some decks, it's your only option. And there's a reprint of Roller Skates, which I've seen people moaning about, but I don't get the moaning about Roller Skates, because it's Roller Skates. You flip a coin, you draw free cards. It's trainer-based draw. It helps with speed decks. The reason it's being reprinted is simple. It's the same reason any card is reprinted. If we reprint a card, it keeps it in the format for a period of time. Why would you not want to keep a card in the format for a longer period of time unless it's entirely broken? It's a good thing. Speaking of keeping a card in the format potentially too long, double colourless energy. Now, double colourless energy I like. Some people have been moaning about this on Facebook over the past few weeks, saying that it's been reprinted too many times. Essentially, this will keep it in the format quite a bit longer. But think of all the options double colourless energy brings back. And if anything, Enhanced Hammer's just been released in the same set, which means, for the time being at least, double colourless energy will, for the foreseeable future, never be legal when Enhanced Hammer isn't also legal, which brings a risk-reward element to double colourless energy, which we didn't have before. I think it's a good thing. I'm happy to see it back. And the last reprint we've got in this set, and I've started going out of order, and I'm going to get confused in a minute. So if I forget any cards, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk or tweet me at the Wassy. VS Seeker versus Seeker. It's a reprint of an old card. It's got the same name. That means you can use the old prints you might have lying around. You don't have to go buy new cards. Put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. And the question you've got to ask yourself here, ladies and gentlemen, is, do you prefer this over Palpad? Honestly, I'm going to say yes. But it depends how you're using it. If you watch my YouTube channel regularly, you'll see me use plays such as using Palpad to put 2 ends back into my deck in games, and there was been at least one game on there where I played like 5 ends in quick succession to actually win a game when I went massively behind. For games like that, you want Palpad. In really fast speed decks, you might want to use Palpad to put 2 Juniper or 2 Colress back into your deck. But most of the time, you want VS Seeker. If I'm running late, and Palpad, as I've said many times before, it doesn't give you early game consistency. All Palpad does is give you late game consistency. And most of the time, I don't want to put a Colress back into my deck. I want a Colress. VS Seeker gets it and I can use it now. I don't want to put 2 Lysandra back in my deck. I'm only doing that in the hopes of drawing one later. I want a Lysandra now, so I'm going to play VS Seeker. Worst case scenario, I play it when I don't need it. I get end and it's back in my deck anyway, like it would have been with Palpad. VS Seeker is not universally better than Palpad, but most of the time I would say it is. Going to the other cards we've got here then, Robo Substitute. That's basically a 30 HP basic Pokemon, and you play it down. It can't retreat. If it's knocked out, your opponent doesn't take prizes. You can discard it at any point. Quick rulings query. If all of my Pokemon are knocked out, but I've got a Robo Substitute active, does that, or no, actually you can play it on the bench. If I've just got a Robo Substitute in play, and all the rest of my Pokemon get knocked out, do I lose the game? No, because when Robo Substitute is on the field, it counts as a 30 HP colourless basic Pokemon. I like Robo Substitute because it's a switch. And most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, it's just as good as running a switch. I can't play a Robo Substitute, for instance, if it's, I can't run it as if it's, if I've got a full bench, and I suppose it's not always going to be in the active, but I can essentially put the Robo Substitute on the bench, and then something gets knocked out, I put an active, I can discard it and move something else up. It's not as good as a switch, it's not quite as useful, but it has its uses. As a whole, though, it's amazing. I mean, you could run this in a Donphan deck. You switch a Robo Substitute active, they knock it out, whoop-de-doo, they haven't taken a prize. Run it in a Gengar deck. And yeah, they can Lysandra around it, they can Escape Rope around it, but they've got to get around it. I love Robo Substitute, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's going to see a lot of play in a lot of different decks. Now, it can't retreat, but of course I can stick it active and then kill it, and then put what I want active. It's not perfect. A lot of the time a Sigilyph with a Floatstone is going to be better, because I can block them attacking and then retreat it, whereas Robo Substitute, I can't retreat it, I've basically only got it 4 times in the game if I run 4, but I still like it because it opens up plays. Couple of cards to finish off. Steel Shouter. Metal Pokemon cannot be affected by special conditions. It's an amazing card. It's like Virizion, but it can't be shut off by Garbodor. It doesn't take up space on your bench, and it can be easily countered by your opponent playing another stadium. If you are running a metal deck, you want to be running this. Target Whistle. Put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto his or her bench. Very good card under some circumstances. If you do bench damage, you are going to want to play this card. But this is going to, so for instance, if I could bring an Eevee onto their bench, and then I could hit it twice with something like Landorus's first attack, Hammerhead, and then it's going to be dead. But the play I really love with Target Whistle is Target Whistle Lysandra. I've got one prize left to take. Target Whistle, Lysandra, knock out a low HP basic. Or, say I'm playing a Donphan deck and they've got 1 tech Darkrai in their Yveltal deck. Even if they discard it with a Juniper, they put it in the bench, and then I go Target Whistle, Lysandra, knock it out for 2 prizes. I think Target Whistle is going to be the kind of card, and I could be wrong here, but Target Whistle for me is a card where you play it as a one-off if you can possibly make room for it. It's not going to be used all that much, but it can be a huge card. The other thing, of course, is Target Whistle completely screws over your opponent. If they've got 5 Pokemon out, say you're playing against a Plasma deck, and they've got 5 Pokemon out, and you're thinking, hang on a second, if they put down another Deoxys, they can KO me. All you need to do is bring a Pokemon onto their bench that isn't Deoxys using Target Whistle, and they can't put a Deoxys on the bench. It's very cool. 2 trainers left. Trick Coin I've talked about. Flip Coin, essentially, if you use an attack, Trick Coin as a tool, you can reflip coins. Good for something like Malamar. It's not going to be used very often, but it's kind of cool. And the last one we need to talk about is Xerasic, or however you want to pronounce it. I don't really care. One last thing, about Trick Coin. You may only use effects that let you flip coins again, including effects from other cards once used during your turn. I.e., you couldn't use this and Victini, because they are both effects that let you reflip coins. Xerasic, choose a Pokemon tool or special energy card attached to a Pokemon in play, and discard it. Generally, this is utter garbage, because it doesn't do anything more than Enhanced Hammer does, and it's a supporter, not a trainer card. Enhanced Hammer allows you to discard it, as does Xerasic. Tools are better gotten rid of with the Startling Megaphone card, and Special Energy is better gotten rid of with Enhanced Hammer. Xerasic does let you discard your own tools or special energy, which is useful, especially if you've got, say, a Muscle Band down and you want to put a Spirit Link, but there are better cards that are trainer which don't involve using your supporter for the turn. The only real good use I see for this is, for instance, if you're playing against something like, let's say for argument's sake, you're playing against a Seismitoad deck, you might want to use this because you can't play an Enhanced Hammer, but other than that, this is not a particularly good thing. It's not something I think you're going to want to use. As a side note, the card I keep talking about, which allows you to bring your own tools back, is Tool Retriever. It was released in Furious Fist, and it allows you to pick up to 2 Pokemon tools attached to your Pokemon and put them into your hand. You would use this instead of something like Xerasic. I suppose you might want to use Xerasic if you've got a bicycle in hand and don't want to clog your hand with trainers, but that's really going too deep. And the very last card we're going to talk about today is Mystery Energy. Like Strong Energy and Herbal Energy, it's specific to one type, it being Psychic here. It can only be attached to Psychic, and if it's attached to anything else, it gets discarded. What it does do is it reduces the retreat cost by 2. This means that it can substitute for Floatstone while being an energy in any Psychic deck, but do remember it's vulnerable to Enhanced Hammer. I wouldn't play loads of these because A lot of the time you're just going to want to use Floatstone, and Enhanced Hammer is going to be a big issue going forward, but it's one of those cards that I think should be in consideration, like Herbal Energy in Virizion Genesect. It's not a straight 4 of like Strong Energy is in fighting decks, but it's the kind of card that you are going to want to consider. How that took almost 55 minutes, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. I guess this is just a particularly interesting set. But regardless, that is the EXs, Mega EXs, and Trainer cards from Phantom Forces. I will be going through the hidden gems, or more accurately, given that things like Bronzong are most certainly not hidden, the non-EX Pokemon in next week's podcast. I don't think any of you want me to keep going for another 45 minutes. That's a lie. Some of you might, but I'm not going to. As always, if you disagree with anything I've said, if I've missed something, if I've misspoken, if there's something you've spotted in any of the cards I've spoken about which I haven't mentioned and you think I should, or if you just want to say hello, like somebody in Spain did the other day, or someone in Tennessee did the other day, all of which I very much appreciate, then you can tweet me at the Wassy, or you can email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on SoundCloud, WordPress, YouTube, etc., just leave a little comment down below and I will get to it shortly. If you're waiting for YouTube videos, I assure you I have not forgotten, ladies and gentlemen, but unfortunately things are conspiring against me for the time being. Thank you very much for watching. Look after yourselves until next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.